A day in the life of an English learner who never gives up. Welcome to English 101, the podcast where language learning comes to life. Today's episode is special. It's not a lesson. It's a story about persistence, passion, and progress. You're about to step into the shoes of an English learner who never gave up. No matter how many mistakes they made, no matter how slow the progress seemed, no matter how many times they felt like quitting. Through early mornings, busy afternoons, late nights, and everything in between, this learner kept going. Why? Because they believed in something bigger, the power of communication, the dream of fluency, and the confidence that comes from doing the hard work. This isn't just their story. It could be yours too. The alarm rang at exactly 5:30 a.m. The room was still dark, quiet, and a little cold, but the moment the sound echoed, Samira reached over and shut it off. She didn't press snooze. She never did. Her eyes opened slowly, her body tired, but her mind already awake with one thought. Today is another day to grow. Samira was not a beginner, but she didn't call herself fluent either. She was somewhere in between, a long and messy place that most language learners know too well. But she didn't mind. This was her journey. And every morning before the world rushed in with its noise and demands, she claimed 1 hour just for her and her English. She sat up in bed, took a deep breath, and grabbed her small notebook. Every morning started the same way. 3 sentences about how she felt, what she dreamt, or what she was grateful for. And she wrote them in English. They weren't perfect. She didn't check the grammar. That wasn't the point. The point was to practice expressing herself, honestly, with whatever vocabulary she had. At 5:45, she put on her headphones and opened her favorite podcast app. She listened to an episode from The English Coach, one about building vocabulary through storytelling. She didn't take notes. She just listened. She let the words wash over her as she got ready for the day. Washing her face, brushing her hair, choosing her clothes, all while hearing the rhythm and melody of English, real, imperfect, human English. By 6:30, she was in the kitchen. The coffee was brewing, and her breakfast was simple: toast with peanut butter and a banana. As she ate, she opened YouTube and watched a short video on phrasal verbs. The teacher was energetic and made her laugh, especially when he acted out expressions like give up, hold on, and cheer up. She repeated each phrase quietly to herself between bites, mimicking the accent. Then she did something strange, something most people didn't understand. She spoke out loud, to herself. "Okay," she said softly. "Today I want to stay positive, even if I forget a word, even if I don't understand something." She smiled. "Because I am learning. I am improving. And I don't give up." At 7:15, she left for work. She walked 20 minutes to the bus stop, and during that time, she listened again. This time to a shadowing track. She repeated each sentence right after the speaker, trying to match the speed and intonation. Sometimes she mumbled. Sometimes she whispered. Sometimes she paused. But she always kept going. On the bus, she reviewed a few flashcards on her phone. Not hundreds, just 10. She believed in doing a little every day, not everything in one day. And when she didn't remember a word, she didn't panic. She just smiled and said, "That's okay. I'll get it tomorrow." At the office, she switched to her work language, her native tongue. But English was never far from her mind. During lunch, while others scrolled through social media, she opened an article from an English-language news website and tried to read one full page without stopping. If she didn't understand something, she guessed from the context. Understanding is more important than translating, she reminded herself. At 3 p.m., during a short break, she opened a small notepad where she had written down 3 new idioms that morning. She tried to use each one in a sentence in her mind. Break a leg? I hope my friend breaks a leg in her job interview today. She giggled. Wait, that sounds wrong unless you know the meaning. By 6 p.m., work was done, and Samira was tired. But learning didn't stop. She wasn't forcing herself. She'd built these habits slowly, one by one, and now they were a part of her life. Like brushing her teeth or drinking water. Her English practice wasn't a task. It was a routine, a rhythm, a part of her identity. She walked home, this time without headphones. She let her mind rest. But as she passed a bakery, she read the word "special offer" in English on a sign. Her brain registered it automatically. Hey, she thought. 2 years ago, I wouldn't have understood that. And she smiled. Dinner was quiet. She lived alone, but sometimes she liked that. It gave her time to focus. After eating, she opened her laptop and joined a virtual English group chat. It wasn't perfect. Some people talked too fast. Others had strong accents. But Samira spoke anyway. She asked questions. She answered with short sentences. She made grammar mistakes, but she didn't care. She was learning through connection, not correction. And when someone said, "You're doing really well, Samira," her heart warmed. Not because she needed praise, but because someone saw her effort. At 9:30 p.m., she sat down with her notebook again. This time she wrote a short reflection. I'm proud of myself. I practiced English in the morning, on the bus, at lunch, and even after dinner. I made mistakes. I forgot words, but I didn't give up. I'm still here, still learning, still growing. She closed the book and smiled. Then she whispered to herself, Fluency doesn't come from one big action. It comes from 1,000 small ones. Every single day. And then, with tired eyes and a peaceful heart, she turned off the light and fell asleep, ready to do it all again tomorrow. The next morning came quickly. Samira woke up before the sun once again, her eyes heavy but her purpose clear. As she sat up in bed, she felt a familiar mix of fatigue and excitement. Every day was a new chance. A new step forward. A new sentence spoken. A new mistake made and learned from. This morning, she did something slightly different. Instead of writing in her notebook right away, she picked up her phone and recorded herself speaking. No script, no plan, just freestyle talking about her goals for the week. I want to improve my listening, she said. I want to learn how to talk about health topics. I also want to practice my small talk. She paused. Then she added with a laugh, and I want to stop being afraid of saying the wrong thing. Later that day, she listened to the recording while walking. At first, she cringed at the sound of her own voice. Do I really sound like that? But after a few minutes, something changed. She started noticing things she liked, the way she used rising intonation at the end of a question, or how her pace was steady. Yes, there were mistakes, but there was also progress, and that made her proud. Around 10 a.m., while making tea, she repeated a few tongue twisters in English. She sells seashells. She laughed as she stumbled over the words. Then she tried again, and again. This isn't just pronunciation practice, she thought. It's training my brain to move faster in English. After lunch, Samira had a Zoom call with her language partner, Diego from Mexico. They had met 6 months ago through a language exchange app. At first, their calls were awkward, long silences, nervous laughter. But now, it felt like talking to an old friend. Today they discussed their favorite books. Samira talked about The Alchemist, trying her best to explain the deeper meaning of the story. She struggled to find the right words for destiny and personal journey, but Diego helped her. And she helped him with pronunciation when he said philosophy as philosophy. They both laughed and encouraged each other. That's what made the call special. Not perfect English, but a perfect connection. In the evening, Samira watched a movie in English with English subtitles. It was a romantic comedy, and though she didn't understand every joke, she got the main idea. She paid attention to expressions like, "Are you kidding me?" and "I'm not buying it." She paused the video now and then to write down phrases that sounded natural. Then she did something powerful. She practiced using those phrases in her own made-up situations. "Are you kidding me?" she said with a dramatic face in front of her mirror. "I'm not buying it," she laughed. It felt silly, but it was fun, and it helped her build confidence. At 9 p.m., she reviewed her notes from the week. She had added 15 new words to her vocabulary list, 10 new phrases, and 3 grammar points she wanted to work on. But instead of testing herself or stressing out, she simply read them out loud, imagining how they would sound in real conversation. Then she did something else. She sent a short message in English to her future self. She opened a note app and typed, "Dear future Samira, I hope you're still speaking English every day. I hope you're not afraid of making mistakes. I hope you've made new friends, shared your ideas, and grown in ways you never imagined. Don't forget how far you've come." When she read it back, her eyes got a little teary. Not because she was sad, but because she knew she was becoming the person she had always wanted to be. She closed the app and looked at the clock. It was time to sleep. But as she turned off the lights, she whispered something she had learned from a TED Talk once. Courage is not the absence of fear. It's doing it anyway. And with that, she drifted into dreams. Dreams in English. The next few days followed a similar rhythm. Samira wasn't chasing perfection. She was building consistency. And every small choice she made added to a bigger picture, one of quiet determination. She didn't have fancy materials, a private tutor, or hours of free time. What she had was something more powerful, a mindset that refused to give up. One morning, she overslept. The alarm didn't go off. She rushed out of bed, skipped her usual writing, and barely made it to work on time. On the way, she felt guilty. "I missed my English hour," she whispered. But then she smiled and said aloud, "It's okay. I'll find another time today." At lunch, instead of scrolling through social media, she opened a short story in English, just 3 pages. It was about a man who found a lost dog. The vocabulary was easy, but the story was touching. She found herself smiling at the ending and even copied down a sentence she liked. Sometimes you don't know you're lost until someone finds you. That line stayed with her all day. Later that evening, Samira did something she'd been avoiding for months. She recorded a video of herself speaking English. She talked about her daily routine, her favorite foods, and her weekend plans. She felt nervous, stumbled over some words, and even said thinked instead of thought. But she didn't stop the recording. She finished her sentences, smiled at the camera, and uploaded the video privately to her Google Drive. One day, she thought, I'll look back at this and see how far I've come. That night, she reviewed messages from a few friends she had met in online English groups. One of them, Maria from Brazil, had written, I watched your video. You're getting better every week. I love your energy. Samira felt warmth in her chest. Feedback like that reminded her that she wasn't alone in this journey. The next morning, she returned to her regular routine. But this time, she added something new. While walking to work, she tried describing everything she saw, in English. The sky is cloudy. The man in the red jacket is drinking coffee. That car is too fast. She wasn't talking to anyone. She was just training her brain to think in English, step by step. At work, she had a surprise. Her manager asked if she could help translate a short email into English. Samira's heart raced. Me? Are you sure? Yes, her manager smiled. You've been studying, right? She took a deep breath and said, Okay, I'll try. She spent 15 minutes on the translation, checking the tone, double-checking the grammar, and using polite phrases she had learned from business English videos. When she handed it in, her manager nodded. Nice work. Samira walked back to her desk with a quiet smile. It wasn't just a task. It was proof. Proof that her effort was real, that her learning had value. Later that week, during a rainy afternoon, Samira went to a local bookstore. She looked at the English section and chose a beginner's novel. Not too simple, not too advanced. As she paid for the book, the cashier smiled and said, Practicing English? Samira nodded. Yes, every day. Good for you, the cashier said. It takes dedication. Samira laughed softly. I have that. That night, she curled up in bed with her new book and a warm cup of tea. She read slowly, underlining expressions, guessing words from context, and whispering lines out loud. Page after page, her confidence grew. And just before closing the book, she wrote one more line in her notebook. Even slow progress is progress. One word, one sentence, one day at a time. It was Sunday morning. The streets outside were quiet, the kind of peaceful silence that makes you want to slow down. Samira sat at her kitchen table, her notebook open, a pencil in her hand. She wasn't studying grammar or reviewing vocabulary. She was writing her story, in English. Today, she wrote, I want to reflect on a journey so far. I've made mistakes, repeated lessons, and sometimes felt like giving up. But here I am, still learning, still showing up. She paused, looked out the window, and smiled. The clouds were moving slowly across the sky, just like her English. Steady, gentle, unstoppable. That afternoon, she joined a free online webinar called Speak Without Fear. The instructor talked about the emotional side of language learning, about fear of judgment, the pressure to sound perfect, and the shame that often stops people from even trying. Samira found herself nodding with every sentence. She had felt all those things. The tightness in her chest before speaking. The way she'd rehearse sentences in her head but go silent when it was her turn. The way she'd smile and pretend to understand instead of asking, "Can you repeat that?" But now, she was different. Not because those feelings were gone. They still visited her from time to time. But because she didn't let them win anymore. She had learned to speak anyway, to try anyway, to connect anyway. After the webinar, she wrote in her notebook again. "It's okay to feel fear. What matters is what I do with it." In the evening, she cooked dinner, a simple rice and vegetable dish. As she stirred the pot, she practiced speaking. She pretended she was on a cooking show. "Today, we're making a healthy, easy meal. First, we chop the onions. Then, we add some salt and spices." She giggled at how dramatic she sounded, but she kept going. After dinner, she did a short writing exercise from an English blog she followed. The topic was, "Describe your perfect day." She didn't write about luxury or travel. She wrote about a day like today, a quiet morning, a book, a meaningful conversation, the chance to learn something new, a moment of pride. At 9 p.m., she received a voice message from Diego. "Hey Samira, I was thinking, maybe next time we can talk about job interviews. I had one last week and it was intense." She replied with her own voice message. "Yes, that sounds great. I want to practice job vocabulary too. Let's do it." It wasn't just an English exchange anymore. It was a real friendship, built through shared effort and honest communication. Before bed, she picked up her phone and scrolled through a folder of screenshots. Phrases, quotes, grammar tips, kind messages from other learners. One screenshot caught her eye. It said, "Consistency beats intensity." She whispered the words again and again. Consistency beats intensity. Then she turned off the light and lay in the dark, her mind calm. No doubt. No rush. Just trust in the process. In her heart, she knew she was no longer just learning English. She was living it. And when the alarm rang the next morning at 5:30, she didn't hesitate. Because that's what people do when they never give up.